Greetings, everybody. First, thanks you all for coming. I don't know about you, but it's a wet, windy day here in Western Washington, so at least we can be inside. Also, I want to thank everybody for your patience and with using Wisaard through these months. It's been a little bit bumpy, but we work as hard as we can to make sure everything is going okay and that everybody gets help when needed. So let me get started talking about the historic property inventory form. But first, more importantly, I'd like to offer everyone some coffee and a muffin. These are one of the things that I'm missing right now about having these talks in person is like the ritual of having the coffee and the muffin ahead of time. So yeah, I also let me know. Well, everybody who had to shut the door to make sure their cat doesn't walk on their keyboard, say hello. No, I'm just kidding. Don't say anything. But I did have to shut the cat out. So let's go. So what is the HPI and why do we do them? So there's several reasons. You may think it's only regulatory compliance, but that is not so. Remember, the name of actually the Wisaard is based on this Washington State Inventory of Architectural Records. So that's what Wisaard is at its heart. It is an inventory of architectural records, and well, archaeological and architectural records, but the HPI is the architectural. So it has a couple of purposes. So its purpose is documentation. So it is a place to put documentation of resources at a moment in time. It is, and the resulting records are used for preservation planning and regulatory compliance. And maybe there's other uses, research. Who uses it? So lots of people, professional consultants, federal and state agencies, CLG, certified local governments, the public, DAHP staff. We have a wide audience that has to be using the Wisaard. It is part of our mission to record the state's historic built resources. It's part of our responsibilities under the NHPA. So when we are looking for good data as part of that mission. The HPI form is used to document a resource at a moment in time, and it is a permanent record. So even if you are just getting through regulatory compliance by recording a resource, remember that it is a permanent record. It's not ephemeral. And so write it like it's going to last a long time. This is my third slide. The website has instructions, guidelines, and tutorials. The website here, well, this is the Cultural Resources Guidelines link. So everything I will talk about today is written down in minute detail about how to fill out the inventory form and also how to write a report for historic built environment. I'm scared to click this, but I'm going to do it. Oh, I did it. Okay, so here is the page where the Washington State Standards for Cultural Resource Reporting live. Here is the PDF down here. If you have gotten a PDF from somewhere else, it may not be the most recent PDF. So always come here to this website for the most recent PDF. Google caches old PDFs, and they're somewhere on the web server. But if you bring it up and it is not the 1/2/2020 PDF, it is not the most recent PDF. So go back here. Whoops. Clicky. Stop it. My second link here is to our Wisaard help page. So everybody, maybe you haven't done a new HPI form yet. The web address for Wisaard has changed. We no longer log into SAW. We have login instructions, sign up instructions. Chrome is a preferred browser, but Firefox and Microsoft Edge work fine. Internet Explorer does not work fine. Safari, I think, works fine. But we definitely haven't tested it on Safari. At the bottom of this page is where the tutorials live for now. I'm trying to get them inserted into the Wisaard application actually, so the help box on the Wisaard homepage actually goes to help. So hopefully that will happen soon. So I've got an Easy2 tutorial, and that's just a PDF, but I did these new tutorials. I don't know if you've seen them yet, but they are pretty cool. I've used the story map from Esri as the template for these. So I have a lot of interactive things, and I have little videos, demonstrations of things. So if you are having any trouble, please come to the help page, click on this tutorial, and then you can watch a video of actually how to add people into your project or how to use the mapping tool. So that I want to highlight those tutorials. Oh, I already did the tutorial demo. We'll skip that. So make sure you go check those out if you need some help. If you can't get the help you're looking for, please always just email me at the support@dahp.wa.gov. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is qualifications. We get a lot of questions about qualifications. Does someone have to have certain qualifications to fill out an HPI form? And the answer is it depends. So an HPI form is not just a form, but it's speak for saying we need this structure or resource to be evaluated within National Register criteria, if in a regulatory framework. An HPI, is a method for recording a resource at a period of time. To be honest, this may or may not include an evaluation in accordance with National Register criteria. But the majority of HPIs are completed by consultants and agencies in a regulatory context. And these forms should always include a discussion of the National Register criteria. The other major user group are CLGs and consultants hired to do CLG grant projects. Some CLGs may even have volunteers completing inventories of their local resources. So they're adding maybe a photos and history. There will be no regulatory review, and there may not be a discussion of the National Register criteria. So if you're looking in Wisaard and you're seeing some inventory forms that don't have, a discussion of National Register criteria, you've got to consider the context that they were completed in. There are varying states of data in Wisaard, as you all know. So the second thing I want to say about this is, there's nothing in Section 106 or 36 CFR 800 that says a person has to meet the Secretary of Interior's qualification standards in order to perform any cultural resource work. So when you say, does the person have to meet qualifications in order to fill out an HPI form, the answer is nobody can make you have qualifications. What the law actually says for 106 is the agency official should make a reasonable and good faith effort to carry out appropriate identification, which may include, et cetera, et cetera. The Secretary's standards and guidelines for identification provide guidance on this subject. So first thing it says, it doesn't say anything about the qualification standards or what the person needs to meet. And it says the standards and guidelines for identification provide guidance and not a policy or rule. So we're not interested in, we're not interested in quibbling over who meets one of the qualification standards. We prefer everyone self-selected appropriately. But sometimes surveys are submitted and it's clear that the surveyor is not experienced in built environment evaluation. And then we don't have enough information to concur, and then we have to send back the survey, which takes everyone more time. We'd simply like to avoid this to the extent possible, which is why we recommend qualified personnel to perform the work. Again, we recommend, and they're guidelines, not policies. It just makes it easier for everybody if the right person does the right job in the first place. So for Section 106, our job is to concur or not concur. And we need the evaluations to be sufficient for us to do this. We need the evaluator to prove that the resource is or is not eligible and to provide documentation of how that conclusion was reached. I used to work in the private sector, and one of the biggest lessons, and I used to write, statements of significance, and then when I got to and then they might send them back for more information, and it wasn't until I got to like the SHPO that I realized, oh, SHPO's not just going to take my word for it because I'm an expert. So we need the evaluator to prove that the resource is eligible or not eligible. It is not our job to figure it out, although we are asked to quite a bit. SHPO doesn't take your word for it because we have this pesky legal responsibility. And we also have to have, enough information that we can make a defensible decision. So I can point back to that file in 3 years and say, hey, this is the information I used to make that decision. When something hits the fan and they're like, well, how did you come to this decision? Well, here's how I came to that decision. So everything has to be written down and clear. If you're an agency that is hiring a consultant to perform architectural survey, the quickest way to get through it is have a professional architectural historian that has enough base knowledge that they can complete an HPI form without much research. To illustrate this point, I quickly jotted down things I could discern from the building in this photo. So I just plucked this building out of our photos folders, and I said, okay, well, let's do this one. I don't know where it is. I don't know anything about it other than the photo. So here's what a qualified person can pluck out and do in 10 minutes without doing any research. So this building was built sometime between 1920 and 1935, when the revival styles of the early 20th century are starting to fade, but the commercial block was still being built. So this is before the shift to modernism. Yes, I saw that date stone up there, but before I jotted down the date. So, hey, I know, you got me. But I think it says 1928, so I was right. This building was not expensive to build and likely does not represent the work of a master. It is in a commercial center of town that is probably small, less than 10,000 people, or in a larger city with smaller neighborhood commercial centers. The road is fairly wide and looks a bit more urban than a small town. The form of the building is a one-part commercial block, or according to Longstreth's widely accepted typology. It is a common type, and it is a good example of its type. It probably has a hollow clay tile structural system with a brick veneer on the front. Could be concrete block, though, or board form concrete. I would need to check the party walls. So in this case, this is an example of where an oblique photo would come in handy. A lot of times we'd rather have an oblique photo than a straight-on photo because you can see more, especially if the physical description hasn't described what the party walls look like. Concrete wasn't well used by this time, so it's a good chance it's board form concrete or block. The glass transom that has been covered with sheet metal on the storefronts, this has been altered probably originally in the 60s, maybe the 70s, but the sheet metal looks fairly recent, so it's been redone. There's probably, the transom may still be intact, it's just covered, and there also may be a drop ceiling inside, which was probably accommodating the air conditioning that was installed. Transoms are often covered when a drop ceiling is installed. There's a 50-50 chance that it is either listed in a listed historic district or an eligible historic district. The flanking buildings appear to be intact, so I'm looking at context there, physical context. It certainly retains enough integrity to be contributing to a historic district, but probably not individually eligible due to the slight integrity issues and lack of individual distinction. So its significance lies in it being part of a whole, as in a downtown center. So basically, all those things I just said is enough information to provide a meaningful evaluation. And so a person who is experienced in this can do that fairly quickly without much research. The only other thing I would do if I was just doing a reconnaissance survey is I would take a peek at Sanborn maps to see if this was the first building on the site or if there was previous building there, and that would be about it. So this is what you get when you hire a qualified professional Michael will go in more into detail about statements of significance, so I'm not trying to go into that, but I just want to illustrate the reason that we recommend the qualification standards, and it's just to let you know that they're not a requirement, and we don't claim that they are. Okay, let's move it on. So we do spell out, you know, what's the difference between reconnaissance and intensive survey. And these are, they kind of have been adopted as policy, but they are definitely not policy. They are guidelines. They are not hard and fast rules. Most inventories are hybrid, depending on what information is readily available. Regulatory surveys generally fall loosely under reconnaissance because we're trying to get a broad brush view at what is in the APE. But the surveyor still needs to provide enough information for a meaningful evaluation. If that takes a little more research to get the job done, then that's what has to happen. If 2 photos isn't enough to convey significance, you know, provide more photos. Film is cheap. If this big building in this photo here, you know, 1 photo, 2 photos is probably not going to do it. So keep that in mind. It's not good, it's not bad or wrong to add more photos. CLG survey projects are often better researched than regulatory projects due to the nature of the need, the focus on the buildings, not something else like the project, and the absence of regulatory pressure. And another note is that CLG grant personnel are required to meet the qualification standards as a stipulation of their contract. So when we have a actual contract, when we hold the contract, and it's for historic preservation fund funds, then it is required to meet the qualification standards. So Section 106, not required. CLG grant survey, required. And for any contract that we hold with consultants. Intensive survey, you know, specifically, is usually done when resources are already thought to be significant. So to either expand the body of knowledge, context of a resource type, or in preparation for a National Register nomination. Basically intensive will be done when something is determined eligible. So if it's determined not eligible, we don't really need to do intensive research on it. Again, Michael will talk more about the statement of significance. How's my time? I have till 11:20. Okay. Let's move on about these. Again, these are kind of discussed in the Cultural Resource Guidelines document that I showed you the link to. Okay. There are thousands of records in the HPI in varying states of completion and data reliability. The HPI records are a starting point. They're not the finish line. So everything that you find in the HPI should be checked. If you want to use it as a source, you should check it out first. It's been inputted by thousands of people for many different purposes over the decades. So just keep that in mind. But going forward, I've come up with some rules. They're actually not rules. They're guidelines. Nothing bad will happen to you if you don't follow this. But it makes the HPI easier for everyone to read and get information from. So some rules to live by are: the absence of information is better than wrong information. So if you are filling out a form and you don't know, please don't put in something that is wrong or a guess. Unless it is a date guess, then you can check the circle box. But remember, don't put wrong information. Just leave it blank. I'd rather have nothing than wrong. No piece of data needs to be entered twice. So the name doesn't need to be entered twice. The address doesn't need to be entered twice. No piece of data entered twice. This commonly happens on the resource name and the common name. So the common name will always be different than the resource name. Speaking of naming, please name every resource. I don't care if it is a generic name. It could be called commercial building, or it could be called residence, or it could be called library. If you don't know, it doesn't have a historic name. That is okay. Please name it. So it's the first thing that people see when they pull up a form. The next rule is one building or structure equals one form. This is a general rule. It is not always cut and dried how to do this. I get calls frequently with folks asking me how to break up this particular resource. Should I put it on one form? Should I put it on 3 forms? How should it be done? And we always have constructive discussions, and we figure out each case that needs to be figured out. So don't stress about this. If you have a question at all, please just call, and we will figure it out together. But generally, the HPI form is meant to hold one thing. So you only get one name, you only get one location, you only get, you can put in multiple characteristics, but I don't recommend it because it would be hard to get data out later. You can put in multiple photos, but then again, what is the name of the form? Is the name of the form barn, or is it residence? And if you put barn and residence on one form, then when you go to search for barns, you're not going to get this one. It's some of it is about input and some of it is about export. So think about what you'd want to search on later, maybe. Only the next bullet, the only information that is relevant to the subject of the form should be on the form. So the form is about a building. The form isn't about a project. The form isn't about what is going to happen in the future as a result of a project. So project information is fleeting and it is ephemeral, and as soon as your project is over, that stuff's going to be irrelevant. The HPI form is meant to record a resource at a point in time. Project information is irrelevant. Project information should be discussed in the report. So going forward, if there's a bunch of project information in an HPI, the next person that reads that form outside that project is going to be confused. Like, what is this? What does this have to do with the building? And what happened? They don't have the report to look at. So keep that in mind when writing your statements of significance. We don't need to know about the project. We just need to know about the resource and the significance of the resource. And then the last one is always search before creating a new HPI form. There are lots and lots of addresses in Wisaard already, and buildings and structures and linears in Wisaard already. So always search before creating a new HPI. If you don't, and you create a duplicate, nothing terrible happened to you, but just let me know and I will merge it, or we'll deal with it. So no worries, but just try to be cognizant of that. Y'all have been very, very good. I appreciate everything everybody does, and every time someone calls me, I'm just so appreciative that they called, because we're just trying to make a better Wisaard, a better HPI. Okay, briefly we'll go over one resource, one form. I kind of went over this stuff already. So let me just say again that when I'm looking at the map and I have multiple structures here and I only have one dot, I really wish there was, a couple of dots, one for each of these, because, I only get one name, right? So this might be the house, and this might be the barn, and this might be an outbuilding. I need to have different characteristics for each of these things. I need to do a determination of eligibility for each of these things. And then it would be great if I had different colored dots that represented which of these buildings would be contributing to a district, if, would be eligible or not eligible. I won't go into districts, but we want to know, because the barn may be eligible, but the house isn't. So we definitely want to parse that out so it's real clear. I'm all about clarity. Let's see. Okay, let's go there. I'm going to do a little HPI demonstration in Wisaard for you, so I'm trying to hurry up. I couldn't do it in the last one because it wasn't done. So I'm trying to get through these so we can do that. So Here's another good example of a complex. Previously, I've seen lots of forms that have one dot for a whole complex, and then it's real hard to figure out what is eligible and what is not from first glance. So this is the Jim Creek radio station. Each of these green dots represents an eligible or contributing part of this district, and it's real easy to tell what's what here. So that is why I kind of preach the one resource, one form. I'm also really glad the naming conventions were followed here, because if this resource name just said pull-off tower, like no one would know what that is. So it's like, oh, it's a radio station tower. That's great to know really quickly off the top. Naming, yes. Historic name or generic name. Do you like my puppy? Oh, he's so cute. He's big now and much darker. His name is Boofa. Remember, historic name or generic name. So residence, no acronyms. Please don't use acronyms because nobody searches by acronym. If you write, BNSF instead of Burlington Northern Santa Fe, if you type in Burlington Northern Santa Fe on a search, you're not going to get BNSF. I'm just using that as one example. JBLM is another example. Anything that has like an acronym, please try to spell it out. Also, please don't use arbitrary numbers. You may have an arbitrary numbering system like building 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it may correspond with a sketch map that you have in your report. But remember that when someone looks at this from outside the context of your report, they're not going to know what those numbers mean. They're not going to have your report. So please refrain from using arbitrary numbers. It could just say barn, outbuilding, house, and that would be okay. That's fine. For complexes that do have an identifiable name, you can use the name of the complex and the name of the building. So the name of the complex hyphen the name of the building. So it could say Gant Farmstead / barn, or Joint Base Lewis McChord / building 27. So we know exactly what we are getting when we look at that form. The common name, if applicable, should be different. So this is only for different things. So other names a person might search. Old historic names, current name now. It's not a rule, but just try not to enter data twice. So this is an example. So say I'm looking at this list of resources in Wisaard, and I've looked at all of them, and now I want to go back and look and see where the barn is. And I'm like, oh no, these are arbitrary numbers. I don't have a key. I don't have any. I don't have the report in front of me, but I need to know which one is the barn. So it's really important that we use names of buildings instead of arbitrary numbers. Excuse me, talking makes my throat. Okay, so this may not be too new to you guys because it's been out a while, but I did when I updated the cultural resource guidelines, I had to include something for linear resources because guess what? We can draw a line now. Isn't that exciting? It doesn't quite work all the time, but we can do it. There's a little bit of a problem with it with lines identifying correctly on the map, which hopefully will be in a fix soon. But again, this is all written down in great detail in the guidelines document, so I'm not going to read it all to you, but there's a couple of main points. So recording linear alignments, we're talking like railroads, we're talking irrigation canals, we're talking things that are long and go on and are basically repetitive. So the first thing you want to do is determine the status. If active, the line is probably intact. So if the railroad line is active, there's probably no breaks in it. So we can kind of assume that. And if it's abandoned, it may not be intact. So and I want to stress that this is all on a case-by-case basis. This is not rules. So if you have an abandoned railroad and there's big chunks missing, a train can't role on it anymore. You know, it may not, it may be going on an ArcSite form. So in those cases, there's not like a policy. So if those things happen, just give us a call and we'll figure it out. But the first thing you want to do is make sure you get it on the right form. I also want to note that none of these linear alignment guidelines are meant to imply that, you know, you got to do more work. We're not asking anyone to do any more field work. We're not asking anyone to do any more research. So just keep that in mind as I go through this stuff. We're stipulating on the next bullet point is we're stipulating basically that location and design are the main aspects of integrity that need to be present for a linear resource to be eligible. Meaning that we can kind of leave out materials. A lot of these linear resources are working and they need to have materials replaced over time, and it happens all the time. And that's okay. You know, having different railroad ties is not going to affect the integrity because the train can still run on it. And so it's got its location. Its design is basically the entirety of the thing. So the entirety of the railroad being the entire track and the prism and the ties and all that and the alignment. So when I talk about design for linears, I'm talking about the alignment being intact and the location of the alignment being intact. A lot of times for these linear resources, the setting is not, you know, that big of a deal. You know, you can put lots of stuff or not stuff next to a railroad, it still retains integrity of design and location. So also note that repetitive features, don't record those separately. So never ever record a pole separately or what am I talking about here? Poles or power poles or things along a railroad that are repetitive, like signals and crossings and all those things. Things that are in a where's my word? Things are in a canal. Here, it's right here on the page so I can see it. Things are in a, you know, have to do with the canals, head gates and, you know, checks and things like that. Those have to be replaced over time because the thing has to function. So we're looking at, you know, not really needing to deal with those individual repetitive features. Definitely don't record them separately. If you can, it makes sense. We request that you draw the entire feature and don't draw arbitrary segments. So this arbitrary segment recording has been going on a long time. I'm trying to change it. Don't be scared. It will be much easier for people in the future. So when I say draw the entire feature, I don't mean inspect the entire feature. I just mean draw the entire feature. And make a case for a segment, if possible. I'm not asking you to do extra research or extra work. I'm just kind of asking you to fill out the form a little bit differently. In general, we can't do a determination of eligibility like on a 50-foot section of a 150-foot long railroad line, right? So that's not really, because a segment is not an individual feature. The entire line in its 150 miles is the resource, right? So if we were going to list it on the National Register, that would be considered one resource. When you do your background research, you know, your simple background research that you would have to do for any historic context report, that will be enough to determine whether or not the resource is part of a larger, you know, complex, or whether or not the railroad is just a tiny little spur in the middle of nowhere. This will be evident. So please try to draw the entirety of whatever you are recording, despite the fact that you only have 50 feet in your APE. Well, I'll explain some more of this here in a minute. So doing that ensures that you have on the map the entire line, and ensures that people in the future know that that line has been recorded. It's not been all field surveyed, and that's okay, because it's going to say that in the statement of significance in the physical description. My dog is barking, so if you can hear that, I'm sorry. My husband left and left her out. So let's see. Well, let's move on. Oh, okay. So if I draw the entire line on the, and I can see it all on the map, someone will know that there's an inventory form for that line already, right? So, and any subsequent recording of the same line should just be an inventory update of that form. So, in new inventories, the new inventory date will show up, and then you will be able to, just discuss your segment in there. Just discuss your segment, and then just upload photos of your segment, and make sure you label them appropriately with the date so everyone can tell. Probably a sketch map is a good idea, so you can illustrate which part you visited. I mean, I'm talking like super basic sketch map. It would probably be the same one that you probably have in your report. So just upload that as a JPEG. And remember not to record repetitive features. All right, let's go on here. So just here's an example of like what is a segment. What could be drawn as a segment as opposed to the whole thing. So here we have the BNSF Railway, which, as we know, is a behemoth and has spurs and sidings and all over the place. So it's really complicated, and I'm not asking you to figure it all out by yourself. We're going to just work together to do it. But here's an example of some identifiable segments. So here's the main line, and then here's segment A, right? It has one line. It goes from the main line, and it goes over to State Route 903. Okay, it goes through Roslyn. Probably is a spur from Cleal into Roslyn. And there's also another little segment here, this segment that goes up to, probably they didn't mean it to go to the golf course, but that's where it goes. Of course, this is abandoned, so we don't have that anymore. But if you were recording it, you could record this segment as one, segment A, segment B, and then the main line. If you're talking about recording the main line and it's like 500 feet long, there may be a way to break it up. So we'll talk about that. That's fine. Let's see. An example, a great example. So right after I wrote this guidance, I had a consultant call me and said, I have this segment of railroad in my APE. It's just a mile segment because that's how big my APE is. However, this segment is part of a larger historic line. And it's a 38-mile segment of this larger line that was completely rebuilt in the 1970s. So all of the original track was replaced and the alignment was changed. And he had historic aerials to tell the difference. So he's like, I'm going to argue this is a segment and is not eligible, even though it was built as part of the larger historic railroad. And I was like, okay, sounds good. That sounds like a valid rationale for recording a segment. So he would draw the 38-mile segment, and we could make a determination on the whole 38 miles because the research had been done on this particular segment, and so this 38 miles will not have to be dealt with again. It won't have to be evaluated again, for 10 years. So that's better, right, than when you go to the map and you see this 30-mile segment. If it's in your APE later, you're going to know, and it's going to be easy, and it's going to be not eligible, and you're going to move on. So that's kind of the beauty of this, I think, hopefully. Bridges and trestles should always be on their own form because they are considered separate structures, and they may be determined eligible individually or not. They also have different characteristics. So remember, and we're going to record those as points, not lines. So, okay, just a pop to look at the irrigation. So here's an example of irrigation. I drew the whole East Low Canal. We haven't put the DOE on it yet. I did this as a test to draw it, and it didn't take me that long to draw it. You're also always welcome to upload a shapefile if you have it, but it really doesn't take long to draw. if you're coming across irrigation features, most of them are on the USA-based topo layer, base layer on Wisaard. So drawing them is not even that bad. But yeah, so anybody who comes across the East Slope Canal will know, that it's already recorded. They don't have to reinvent the wheel, and they can just update information. What we're trying not to do is have 50-foot pieces of a 500-mile long resource be determined eligible individually, because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. For transmission lines, just only record main lines 50 years or older and that come from a main power station. FYI, for those of you who work in the field, most BPA power lines are already recorded. And you can see the Bonneville Power Administration's Pacific Northwest Transmission System multiple property document for context information. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel there. You can look up and do a search in Wisaard for BPA or Bonneville Power Administration in the name, actually. So they're all named with the Bonneville Power Administration transmission, and you can find them easily that way. Again, no need to record the power poles separately unless they're some sort of very significant power poles. Okay. Let's see. A word about photos really quick, because this is what people always want to know. It's all spelled out in the Culture Resource Guidelines. Please upload individual JPEGs. Try to take photos in landscape mode, although you can take them in vertical. Wisaard will handle it fine. It just doesn't print as well if you need to print out the forms. I did a test and figured out that a good size for photos is 1280 by 960 pixels at 72 DPI. So there's no reason to up the DPI because the pixel size is more important here for showing on a computer screen. Higher DPI would be needed if we needed to print it, but that's neither here nor there. So 1280 by 960 pixels is about a 0.5 megabyte photo that fills a computer screen. So you upload that photo, DAHP staff or someone else can click on the photo to make it bigger, and it actually gets bigger, and it's great. So we can see more things. So that's kind of a general rule about photos. Please don't upload thumbnails. We can't see a thing. Always resize and rotate your photos before uploading them. Wisaard does not have the capability to rotate anything or resize anything. Photos will upload in the order that you select them. You can please label them and or change the names once you get them uploaded. Please always put a date. It's really important that you put a date, at least the year. Just a year is great. You can upload PDFs of plans if you have them, or JPEGs if you want them to print. You can upload a PDF of multiple pages if you just have plans. That's fine. And always have a front and an oblique, or you could just have a front oblique. Works good. But probably two obliques, so we can see what's happening on the side. So we can see what the walls look like, what's happening all the way around. Back, photos of all four sides is always fantastic, but you can't get that most of the time. So that's okay. Physical description. Yes, I'm not going over every single thing in the inventory form. I'm just hitting some highlights here. Every single thing is described in the guidelines in detail. But a photo like this is especially important, or a physical description is especially important if you have a photo like this. So this is not a criticism of the photographer, but we can see from the photo there's no way to take a good picture of this building. But in this case, the physical description is going to be very important. So remember that we have to concur or not concur with eligibility. And we can't do that if we can't see the building and if we can't rely on what you have written in the physical description. So the qualifications definitely come into play during field work because the surveyor needs to be able to tell the difference between wood and vinyl siding. You know, if the windows and openings have been altered, if there are any additions or dormers that were added. You know, if you're in the field, you can peek through trees and see those things. You can walk around until you know, no trespassing, but you can definitely walk around and peek and see what's going on here. And when you just have a photo, you know, if maybe someone else took the photo and brings this back to you and says, describe this building, and you're like, I can't because I can't see the building. Well, we're in the same spot if this is the photo that we get in a physical in an HPI form. You know, writing in the form that the property was obscured by trees, you know, so you can't describe it is not of no use, right? So we can't get to our determination of eligibility. So in this case, if we didn't have a good physical description, you know, we'd have to be like, okay, well, we can't do anything, so we're going to send this back to you. You know, we don't expect a better photo. We expect a better physical description, you know, that tells us what's going on here. So the statement of significance, Michael's going to go over this, but remember that what you write in this box it depends on the goal of the survey. You know, the form itself is mostly pulled on menus designed to capture data that has always been collected, you know, for historic properties. We're trying to make it useful and easy to retrieve, you know, but the pull down menus don't really tell us if a property is eligible or not. So that's where the statement of significance come in. For those of you who are doing HPIs in a CLG or volunteer context, you know, you won't have a National Register evaluation. You might put the history of the resource, which is totally fine. And so some statement significance boxes will not be statements of significance, and that's okay. And then always remember to write about the resource, not about the project, and not about the future. What might happen does not matter. Oops. Okay, I can answer questions real quick, or we can wait till after the demo. Well, let's see. We'll just do the demo since I don't see anything in the chat. Okay, I'm going to go through quickly how to fill out the HPI form. So you're going to log in to Wisaard. We'll just assume that you know how to do that, or we'll do that later. And what I need to do to enter any data into the Wisaard is go to my project dashboard. And to enter any data, I need to have a project to put it in. So I will open up one of my projects. This is one of my test projects. So in order to enter data, I will go to the Inventory and Evaluation tab. You can see here that I already have a bunch of properties in my list of properties here. But I'm going to add a new one for y'all's benefit. So what I'm going to do is press and I have extra buttons here that you wouldn't have because I'm logged in as system administrator. So ignore the buttons. You would only have Submit Inventories button. You won't have any of these buttons. So I'm going to hit Create New Inventory. Now when I hit that Create New Inventory, an inventory means two things. It means either create a new resource, or it means add an additional inventory to that resource. So what we're going to do, you can update an existing if you know that there is an existing. You can search by address. Take a little drink. Oh, and if you search and you didn't find it and you need to create a new one, let's just try that. Hopefully nothing happens with the bugs, and no disasters will occur here, but you never know with the Wisaard. So when I create my new property, I will be prompted to give it a name. We're going to name it. Remember, we're going to name it what it is. It's Kim's house. This is not my real address, though. I won't tell you guys my real address. I will put in the address, though, to demonstrate what happens when you do that. So I'm putting in an address I know is not in Wisaard. The thing about this address bar is you can't type in just free text, which I know is an issue. So I don't know if that will ever be able to be fixed. So if you don't have an address, you can do one of two things. Let's see. You can just type in the name of the closest town, and the map will place a point at the center of Ellensburg, Washington. and you can click the vicinity checkbox. And then you can, when you get to the map, you can move the point to where it's supposed to go. But for clarity's sake here, I'm going to add this address. If you know if you're going to be recording a linear feature and you're going to have to use the line tool, click this linear radio button here, please, because it sets up the database to accept a line on the map. One thing about this property location comments is that it currently does not, the data that you write in here currently does not show up anywhere on the form, which is sad, but it is the case. So it's on my list of things to fix for the developer, but his list is long, and this is probably not, this is not like high on the priority. So leave it blank because you won't be able to get to the data later. So I have my name and I have my address. Click next. And if I have a good address, then the map will go right to it. That's exciting. And then there's drawing instructions here. I updated these. So in the next patch, I think these will be updated. But there also is the video tutorial on mapping. So I see that my dot is here, but I see that my dot is not on the building. So what I'm going to do is go click my Draw tab, and then click my Reshape pointer button. Reshape means edit. Then I can go click on my dot, and then I can pick up my dot and move it over to the building. I can also delete my dot, but I have to replace it with something or the form won't save. It will not like it. So I can put a new dot right here. Boom, there's a new dot. I can upload a dot, which I probably don't need to upload a dot, but you can upload your line right here. So that's good. One thing I have noticed just by using it is that it's easier to move, select your shapes when there is no aerial map. So if I try to turn on this imagery hybrid map and try to select my dot, it's a little bit more difficult. Right now it wants to be stuck on pointing. See, I knew I couldn't get through anything without a bug, but we'll just leave that for now. So once you have your location and it's a red dot, and you can create the resource. And then this will open up your blank form. You'll have your inventory date here, 6/9/2020, and then you can fill out these fun pull-down menus. The location data will be here. On new HPI forms, the coordinate information will populate. It won't do this on anything that is existing, even if you move the dot. But when you create new, you get this sweet coordinate information. The geography attribution, go back to the map. You can always edit it while it's in draft status. Okay. Once you submit it, there's no more editing. The attachments, this is where you're going to add your photos. So click Upload New. You can drag photos into this little box. HPI form right now is currently the only place where the drag and drop, I think, is there. I begged and begged and begged for drag and drop. So sometimes I get what I want. Or you can just click it to get to the browser. You can, let's see, let me find some photos here. So you can just pick one, or if you hold down the control key, you can kind of click around and select multiple things. So that's fun. This HPI form, you can't do this on an Easy2, but you can do it on the HPI form. So it's easy to upload multiples. So I did that. Just cancel that. Here on the narrative tab is where you are going to be doing your writing. We hope it's the greatest writing you ever did. What you do is just use this pencil. And everything now has a save button. So everything will prompt you to save it. So there's no more, it doesn't save on its own anymore. You have to actually save it. But there's no overall save button. It's just each individual thing gets saved. The evaluation tab has some great information on it, including this is where you're going to put your surveyor agency evaluation. One thing that's wrong with this right now is that you don't have the ability to say, no, it's not eligible. You only have the ability for the checkbox to say that it is eligible. So it's going to be important that you just describe in your narrative if you think it's not eligible, and just leave these blank if it's not. So that's fine. This will be the SHPO evaluation history. So once you create the resource and we do a DOE on it, it will show up here. We have all these extra buttons over here. You would just have a submit button, but we have the SHPO concurrence button that lets us go in and do the SHPO determination. And here will be your inventory history, which tells you the status of that inventory. So it'll be go from draft to submitted to review complete, etc. And that's where you can find that information. One thing I forgot to tell you is that if you come in here into this resource information, the address, while you can see it here on the resource address, it won't show up here on the resource address. So, but if you type something different in here, the address will change and the dot will move on the map. So if I typed in a completely different address, the dot would move on the map. So just keep that in mind. So what I'm saying is that you can't just come up here and update it to, something that's not a real address. It'll error. These boxes are all edit with the pencil and then check and then save. The characteristics menu. So example for, say I want to add a characteristic. So I have a category and a subcategory basically. So whenever you have these dependent menus, you have to pick both. If you don't pick both, the line on the table will just end up being blank. So if I pick foundation and I pick concrete block and I save that, see this line in the table is going to be replaced with foundation concrete block. Does that make sense? It won't add to this table, it'll replace whatever you put. But if you have to add, if you want another foundation, that's fine. Then it will add to. Okay. Whenever you're filling out these characteristics, be as specific as you possibly can. We have done a lot of work to figure out, what these categories and characteristics. Actually, Michael likes to split things. So that's a lot of why these are like this. Did you know there was this many types of barn and bridge? But we have a lot of things in here that are forms, so it's good for research later. But again, if you don't know, then don't pick it, okay? Let's see. The linear features box will only fill out if you have a linear feature. So just pick the site type. You're going to ignore most of the things in this menu because they're not appropriate. You're going to pick if it's a segment, the length, and then the units. I know, I didn't do it. You're mad at me. It's fine. Okay, one thing I forgot to show you was how to draw a line on the map. So go back to the map, hit the draw. I'm going to hit the draw polyline tool. This is how I draw a line. So click once, and then I'm going to click segments like that. And they're not really segments, it's the same line. It's just got vertices, right? So I can click that and I double click to close that line and then save it, and that's going to be the line I have for this HPI form. Now, please only draw one line. I know that there are times when when the linear feature is split up. We haven't really exactly figured out what to do with that yet because currently the database only accepts one shape per property. So if you draw 2 points on here, just make sure if you draw extra stuff and you leave it with one feature. So all I have to do is go in here, I replace this with a line, I'm going to take my dot and I'm going to get rid of my dot. So now I have one line. Currently, you cannot pan when you are drawing a line. So what you have to do is, I'll go back and I'll select my line, but you can draw with these vertices to make a line longer. You can't add to a line, but you can make a line longer. So if I drag this line, whenever I click one of these gray dots, I'm going to add vertices. So that gives me the ability to drag a line out and reshape it, even though it's off of my page. So I'm going to do this. Now I can reshape it. See, I get a new vertice every time I click the gray dot. So new vertices equals the ability to extend a line. I think I went over that in the mapping in the tutorial video. So we have that. I'll save that, and then my location has been updated. Remember, when you are submitting, to let us know that you have submitted. And it should be in the form of a regulatory letter, or if you are not doing it for regulatory reasons, just send an email. You can still send an email to a regulatory box or send it to support@dahp.wa.gov, and I will take a look. I do quality control for all the HPIs. I try to, and when I do that, I'm looking to make sure they're mapped in the right place and that they have a name. Basically, they're following the HPI rules to live by. So that's my goal. So that's what I'm doing in a quality control. I will put those inventories into, I will press this accept button on my end, and that puts those inventories into in-process status. And that means that they have gone through that first quality control, but they have not been reviewed for their National Register evaluation. So we will only review them for that when we get the letter from the agency. And yeah, then we will, once we do the evaluation, the concurrence or non-concurrence, we will press the review complete button. And that is when all of the information becomes public data. As long as it's in draft or submitted a return status, it's not really viewable by the public. The public can't get into and by public I mean any Wisaard user or anybody with any type of permission. So with that, I'm going to leave it. My time is up. It's 11:22. So let's see. I have a question or two here in the chat. So let's see. Holly asks, does the Wisaard log you out after a certain amount of time? So the Wisaard does not, according to the developer, the Wisaard will log you out, after like a couple of weeks. So since we're not using SAW as our portal anymore, we're using Esri's portal to log in, that it doesn't really log you out, and it won't log you out while you're working or anything like that. So once in a while it will definitely ask you for your credentials again, not your credentials, but it will prompt you to select the organization you want to work under if you have more than one. And if it does that, just do that and you can move on. But logging out is not really an issue anymore. Okay, the next question is, since resources such as the BNSF Railway have already been recorded in several places, if we are going to draw the whole line or segment moving forward, should we create a new HPI or update one of the previous HPIs that is closest to the portion within our APE? So that will depend. There's not like a rule for that. The BNSF Railway, we're kind of going to have to. So a lot of the HPI forms for the railway are HPI forms for segments. So I would have to generally alter the form too much to make it a form for like the whole railway. So what I would probably do in that case, and we would have to look at it, is create a new HPI, and then merge all of the old ones into the new one. So I wouldn't have to alter the old ones. So hopefully that makes sense. But give me a call if something like that happens, and so I can look at like how many previous inventories there are and kind of figure it out so I can merge them. Anything else? It's so weird to have it so quiet. Okay, I don't see anything else. So again, you all can reach me at kim.gant@dahp.wa.gov. Thanks, everybody.